Melbourne's public transport system, encompassing rail, trams and buses, is a reflection of the spontaneous nature of urban development in this city. It conjures up images of an ageing, often decaying network of systems and services that do little to serve and fulfill the needs of Melbourne's changing and rapidly expanding demography. Riding the train every day, one begins to identify some of the key issues surrounding the current network in Melbourne. The most impending issue is that the current network does not support the rapid outward expansion of suburban areas, and this problem falls on both sides of the fence. Instead of building upwards, residential developers build outwards and wait for the surrounding infrastructure to catch up. Conversely, instead of building transport links to service these somewhat isolated community hubs, state governments opt to invest in infrastructure that merely links 2 points together, rather than creating paths to new ones. The government cannot be expected to create new transport routes or branches just to serve the needs of a single residential development, so the problem, we can conclude, spreads beyond the transport sector and into an entirely new systematic level. The second problem is that the current model or framework upon which our transport system operates does little to facilitate expansion in the future. What will things be like in 5 years or even 20 years? Our current network, particularly suburban rail, was designed on the principle that things would never change, or they would change at a rate so slow that the infrastructure would be able to keep up. Nobody could predict just how much Melbourne would outwardly expand as a direct result of the rapid population increase and the culture of freedom surrounding personal home ownership. In its current state, the network is barely coping with patronage demands, so one can only shudder at what the future holds. This brings me to the next issue. How can we, as a collective, unified city, hope to develop our existing network if we do not have a model upon which it can be based or a set of goals to be reached? The time has not been taken to research and formulate a clear definition of what our public transport system should be. No goals have been set. There are no targets to work towards or no deadline to meet. Instead, we wait for the problem to reach boiling point before any action is taken. We have arrived at a point where, in terms of design solutions and interventions, it must go beyond a simple product-oriented solution and become a truly systemic solution, a complete package if you will. On a more specific level, I feel that the current generation of mass transit vehicles are not designed with the utmost efficiency in mind. Efficiency both in terms of space and user-based functionality, as well as environmental efficiency. The topic of environmental efficiency will be elaborated upon further, but in terms of how the current fleet of trains and trams are designed, it is safe to say that a considerable amount of improvement could be made in the areas of space maximisation and user integration. If you look at current suburban train interiors in cities such as Tokyo and New York, there is very little in the way of seating. Instead, much of the interior space is dedicated to standing zones to maximise space utilisation and therefore patronage. Comparatively, the interior layouts of Melbourne's trains and trams do little to utilise space efficiency, instead providing a level of comfort usually associated with that of an intercity service. When patrons step on a train or a tram in Melbourne, they have expectations of comfort, personal space and the occasional seat, but for how much longer will these rather high expectations be able to be fulfilled as more and more people utilise the public transport network for their daily commute? I will be approaching my investigation from a utilitarian standpoint, a methodology that essentially places utilitarianism before beauty and has firmly embedded associations with public transport design. It is my contention that only through meeting the most basic and fundamental needs of the user and designing an object to perform its intended function to its entirety can one hope to design something that is beautiful in every sense of the word. I want to focus on qualitative research, investigating the why and how of public transport, not just what, where and when. The research stage of my investigation will require me to participate in the setting, directly observe the patterns of the user, analyse collected documents and materials, and look at existing successful models that may inform my final communication. There is a considerable amount of cultural theory encapsulated within transport design, and such theories will strongly inform my ability to support the needs of the individual as well as the community. Through my research into cultural theory, I am to create new user paradigms that go on to challenge the currently accepted way of doing things. I hope to focus on creating a balance between service design, user-centered design, and speculative design so as to propose a solution that is relevant in the present as well as in the future. Working in this way will no doubt require me to step into various roles to truly gauge the broad scope of this project. Not only will my investigation require the knowledge one obtains as an industrial designer, but also knowledge pertaining to strict transport design practices and engineering standards. I want this project to eventuate through action research, meeting the people who design the vehicles, build the vehicles, and ride the vehicles. Each group and or individual will have a variety of viewpoints on this situation, and each individual user will be able to provide their own insight into what they view the future of public transport to be. To be able to not only design a vehicle, but look at it from within a multitude of contexts, engineering, network design, manufacturing and user-centered design will be of a great benefit to the final outcome. As an additional part of my research, I will be undertaking a job in the transport industry to truly gauge the scope of the topic. My research phase will be almost constant, in that we'll intertwine with the design phase. I strongly believe in this design through research approach, especially given the ever-changing nature of public transport. In terms of design methods, I've identified two key approaches that I will use in my project. The first one is the incremental method, sometimes known as the sequencing of implementation method. This method involves designing a series of products or prototypes and implementing them into the public realm in progressive, highly regulated stages in order to monitor and record public reactions. In a project as big as this, it is wise to introduce potential design solutions in stages so as not to be confronting to the user. Otherwise the reaction and feedback may be different or less than the designer anticipated. Another design method that I'm interested in is the science method. This method speaks of an explicitly organized, rational and wholly systematic approach to design, treating the design process like a science. The designer identifies the problem, forms a hypothesis, and then performs a series of experiments in order to resolve the problem and in turn prove or disprove the hypothesis. This approach also speaks of a methodical, very structured approach to working, and interestingly enough I found that I naturally work in this way, so it would make sense to keep on using it. Methods such as this are well suited to a project of this nature, in that the very regulated, policy-guided world of transportation design almost demands a scientific approach to both research and design. The final outcomes will be a combination of product-based and system-based solutions. It is important in a project such as this to present a variety of outcomes that fulfill the needs of the individual as well as the community. One of the outcomes will obviously be a vehicle-based solution, but there is indeed potential for a series of smaller projects and research outcomes that detail specific aspects of the project, such as seating, power generation, and sustainable manufacturing methods. I hope my investigation will incite change in the way we think about public transportation and mobility, and change in the way that transportation design solutions are implemented. There has been very little in the way of innovation in transportation technology, and this must be addressed before any progress is made. In an area with such a large scope, there has to be changes and innovations made on every level, the individual, the communal, and the systemic, and nobody in recent years has proposed such changes.